Hi, I'm Helen McAlery. I'm the CLA president, and I am here today with Erin Berman for an interview about the work that she does. So, Erin, can you tell us a little bit about how you became a librarian and when did you know you wanted to work in libraries?
Yeah, so thank you for having me here. It's great to be speaking with everybody today. I got my undergraduate degree in theater history and dramaturgy. And basically, dramaturgy is where I did a lot of the research and play development for a show. So, for instance, if we were going to be doing Macbeth, I would do all the historical research for the show, I would look into the language that's behind it, and then I would end up creating what are called like actors guides in order to disseminate all that information to our cast and crew. And so you can kind of think of it as like a little LibGuide for a play in some ways, and being able to transfer all that knowledge, this huge amount of knowledge, into a digestible format. But right before graduating, I kind of had this feeling that maybe being in theaters wasn't right for me anymore. I've been doing it for quite a while, and didn't really feel like maybe I had that passion anymore. And one of my theater advisors actually had suggested libraries as perhaps an alternative. But right as I graduated, I got an offer for an internship in California at a theater company. And so I went ahead and took that opportunity and started the internship. But as I was a few months into it, I kind of really realized it just didn't feel like the right fit for me. So I applied to join SLIS at the time, it was called. It's now the I School for San Jose, and started library school. And kind of originally thought that I would be doing a lot of back end or database development, something along those lines. But I wanted to start getting involved in libraries right away. So as soon as I started library school, I started volunteering for the local library, the local public library, and it just like immediately knew that that was the fit. I'd always really enjoyed teaching. In my undergrad, I did a lot of theater education and outreach as a minor. And so I started switching my classes over to doing public libraries, children and teen services.
And so now a lot of your work is around the maker movement and in libraries. Was that something you were involved in from the beginning of your library career, or something that you were interested in before you started working in libraries?
Yeah, I always kind of considered myself a maker. I did a lot of costume design and set building and all those sorts of things as part of the theater. You kind of make it your own. As I've gotten older, I realized how much of my youth was about making. My mother used to do fabric quilts or fabric wreaths and make kids clothes. And I would go with her to the arts and crafts fair, and she would have a booth, and she would sell those when I was little. And so it's always kind of been part of my own identity. And I kind of think about making as the opportunity to really bring your imagination to reality, or building something instead of buying it. So we talk about like this maker movement, and it's really categorized by people, this resurgence of people doing it themselves. So you think about like 100 years ago, really that term maker didn't exist because it was just kind of living, right? Like there wasn't an abundance of plastic goods that we could easily acquire from Amazon in one day, right? If you broke something, you couldn't just easily hop on and replace it at the click of a button. But in recent years, there's been this like really surge of people making for the sake of making, right? They don't do it because it's easier. They make because it's empowering. I mean, sometimes it's much, much harder, right? So this new creation that you have, it tells a story and it has meaning. You can look at that box and think about the whole process that you did in order to get that box. A lot of makers are kind of tired of big corporations telling them what they want or need, and instead they see this world as like a real malleable space that you can shape to fit whatever your imagination is. And we've kind of entered into this era where there's all these tutorials and on how to create something. I mean, you can hop on YouTube and figure out almost anything, right? But all of these tools that were once only available commercially are starting to enter into homes, but they're still really quite expensive for the average consumer. Unless you're really, really into it and you already know, you're probably not going to go spend a couple $1,000s on a 3D printer or a laser cutter or something like that. And so it's really neat that libraries are able to kind of offer that place where people can try things out for the first time and explore their imagination in new ways.
I love the way that you describe it, and it also makes me think about the fact that libraries have really always kind of been involved in this work,
Yeah.
even through like the materials that we check out to the public. I'm thinking about like, you know, those thick car repair manuals, like that is also, it's the same thing. It's using your own hands and yourself to do the work, right?
I totally agree. And I actually kind of think of it in this mindset where people used to come into the library, right? And they'd say, hey, I want to learn how to play guitar, or I want to learn how to quilt, or any of those sorts of things. And we'd be like, oh, that's great. Let me take you over here to the books and you can take those home and you can learn how to do it. And so it'd give them the resource to figure it out. Now you can walk into a library and be like, oh, I want to play guitar. And they go, well, that's great. You can check out a guitar. And then on Tuesdays, you can come here and we have guitar lessons. And then let me show you how to access the YouTube videos so you can go home and practice. And then there's these books over here. And it's like, we're actually taking the tool itself and putting it directly into people's hands instead of just giving them the resource from it. We've actually become this place where you can become the content creator, right? Instead of just a content consumer. And that's it's exciting. It's just doing what we've always done. It's just teaching literacies, right? People always jump immediately to book literacy, but there's all sorts of different types of literacy. And that's really what the library is there to be that kind of initial place where people can start to learn things. And it doesn't have to be limited to just kind of book knowledge alone.
I think when you explain it that way, it makes a lot of sense, and it really is taking what we've always done and the materials that we've had and just adding layers of depth to it. I know that still many people are intimidated when you say makerspace or maker movement. When you started to do this kind of work in libraries, was it hard to explain to people, or did you feel like folks got it? And about that.
So I think, you know, we might be a little bit of an exception because we're here in Silicon Valley. And so it's a little bit different than some of the other areas of California even that may not have kind of that idea of the startup and of making kind of entrenched in their just city culture like San Jose does. So people are generally pretty receptive to things. We actually launched off kind of this integration of making into being a fundamental for San Jose's programming models by a kind of mini maker fair type event that I jump-started right after I got here. And we called it Innovate, Create, Discover. And one of the things I did was I actually put a call out for librarians from our university. For those of you who don't know, San Jose Public is also partnered with the university as well. We share our main library branch. And so we put out a call for university librarians and for our public librarians, if they identify it as a maker, to come and showcase their work and teach people different things. And we got this overwhelming response. So I had leather making, and we had book binding, and we you know, talked to people about the fact that these things that they're already doing at home are great avenues for exploration and to kind of people who didn't even think of themselves necessarily as being a maker. And then you start asking them, they're like, oh, well, I do cupcake decorating at home, and I'd love to share how to decorate cupcakes and what kind of art form that is with the public. And so if you kind of start making it more approachable to your staff and trying to think about, what do you already make? What are you already doing? That's usually one of our first questions when we go out talking to our public about making and what kind of things they would like to make in the future is what are you already doing? And so it's kind of a neat way of integrating. And then the other thing is that a lot of people hear makerspace or making, and they start immediately jumping to high-tech tools. And so like, well, we can't afford a 3D printer, or I don't know how to do anything with something high-tech, I'm afraid of it. You don't really need any of that. So we do one thing that's really fun. It's called the Global Cardboard Challenge. And we fill up a room with cardboard and scissors and paints and markers and let people explore and try to create new things out of this simple medium. And that idea kind of came out of this little boy called Kane's Arcade. It was a short documentary where a kid made a whole arcade at his father's shop, even little ticket dispensers and everything, right? And so you can make with very simple tools. It doesn't have to be really expensive or even necessarily technologically advanced.
I think a couple things strike me there, and one is that people are often intimidated by this idea of making because you immediately jump to thinking like, oh, we're talking about 3D printers or some high-tech tool that I don't know about. But when you just flip it and you ask the question, what am I already making? It just makes it feel like it's actually something that any library could accomplish.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that resonates with me is that, you know, when you're talking about this this arcade that this young man made, it makes me think about the way that we work on projects as teams, helping to grow community among the people that are working on those projects collaboratively. And like we even do stuff internally in my library where we have teams of our people working on decorations for Halloween together, and just like the fun of tinkering and figuring out how to make things together just really strengthens bonds between people, and I could see where that would really do that in the community as well. I want to jump though now to the piece that is a little bit more high tech and a bigger scale project. You have this project called the Maker Spaceship. So what is that and what does it do?
Yeah, so I'm actually gonna start. I'm gonna tell you the mission of the Maker Spaceship to kind of give you a broad overall. So the Maker Spaceship is an innovative mobile workshop which overcomes access barriers in San Jose to foster creative ideas, to connect people with technology, and to encourage problem solving, collaboration, and discovery. So it is actually a 39-foot bus, and it's decked out to really be this state-of-the-art lab space. We drive around, visit different areas in San Jose, and we do STEAM, so science, technology, engineering, art, and math maker programs for all ages. So if you can imagine, it's really cool. You can go to sjpl.org/makerspaceship and actually see the bus and see there's a video on there with an inside tour. There's also a really great section on there that's for educators. And we've posted a lot of our program plans and links that we've used in order to help us come up with different program ideas. And there's also a guidebook on there as well on how to create your own mobile makerspace of any size. Our vehicle is very large. It has 2 pop-outs on either side, and we spent about a year just doing the design planning for it. So we received a grant from PLP in order to bring on a design consultant, and we did kind of just kind of using design thinking in order to engage with our community and connect with them, and come up with a problem statement. Instead of looking at how might we build a mobile makerspace, we looked at, you know, how might we encourage people to solve problems creatively? How might we empower people? And so we really looked at that in everything in all of our programming and design of the space. And so the space is extremely flexible. There's 5 inside workstations plus a couple of removable tables. Everything inside has got ventilation. It's got every workstation has its own monitor, and there's a big classroom monitor. There's a monitor on the outside. It has a PA system. And then we put in a couple of pieces of hardware that live on the bus but can be easily changed out as technology changes. So there's a 3D printer, there's a laser cutter, and a desktop CNC. But we worked with a team of librarians to really focus it on creating very solid programming that goes on inside. Everything from cooking classes to 3D printing and really everything in between. And so we have a whole storage room that's filled with different types of equipment that can be loaded on and off the bus depending on what types of workshops we're running on that particular day. And then we also built in a lot of evaluative measures as well, because a lot of libraries use program statistics on how many people attended a program as a metric for how good the program was. But when you can only fit 10 to 20 people inside of your space, that doesn't become a good metric anymore. And so we've been really trying to work to figure all that out. It allows us to create some really great partnerships with our schools and community partners and other establishments to help us hit that target demographic. and bring technology and programming directly to the people. So, you know, you're talking about being intimidated, right? And I think we talk about how libraries are kind of intimidated to even run technology programming inside the library. But remember, when you're running it inside the library, the only people that can access it are the people who can actually get to your library. And librarians, we've all been really great at like our outreach programming and going out and letting people know what we do. And I think there's been an increase in people not just doing programming, letting people know what services we're offering, but actually doing programming out in the community. We're a huge city, and so it's really great that we can actually go into a neighborhood and show that neighborhood that the library is there, and here's, you know, access to that technology right where they're comfortable and where they live.
So can you tell us a story of maybe somebody out there who has participated in a program and what they did and how it impacted them?
Sure. So we just started operations in December, so it's still pretty new. The bus is out there about 15 hours at a mixture of like private and public sites. So sometimes we're at after schools where it's not broadcast online. At other times we're at like Movable Feast, which is our like where all the food trucks come together. So there's a big mix of different types of programs. And our service is actually led by our two of our programming librarians. We have a STEAM librarian, Casey McCoy, and one of our other librarians, Amelia Vanderhyde. And so they actually are the ones, they shared a couple stories with me, so I'll share those with you. The first one, they had a few middle school students, 2 girls and a boy, that were pretty hesitant to start with. And they were doing a makey program. And so they showed them, they were doing drawings where you can use those drawings then to make a piano. And once they showed them that you could actually control Mario Brothers with their drawings, they got really, really excited. They ended up drawing their own really intricate game controllers and having a Flappy Bird competition, and ended up staying there for like over an hour. And then we had a mom come in with her 2 daughters who are 9 and 6, and they were both really shy, didn't really react at all to any of the explanations. One girl started drawing, the other one kind of hid behind her mom. But as they like started drawing and started interacting more, she actually like figured out how to do it, and then it's like it clicks, and all of a sudden they're engaged and they're ready to do it. So it's that, you know, kind of shy initially, and if our librarians, the programming wasn't set up in such a way to kind of like let them gently get on board. And that's one of the things we created about the space too. Like there's even color changing LED lighting. We wanted it to be like this safe place where people came on board and they felt like anything was possible in there, right? It was comfortable and secure. And that's a lot of the feedback that we're getting from people. Even the very first day that we opened, I spoke with a grandfather who was there with his grandson. And the opening day, we just kind of let people come in for quick tours and showed them the space. And he said that every day his grandson had been watching the countdown clock on our website, and that right before, on that day that we opened, he had it up on his computer and it hit 0, and he goes, oh my gosh, we can go on the spaceship now, we can go on the spaceship. And he was just, you know, he was probably about 10 years old, and he was so excited that they were going to get to go online. He said he'd been following all the picture updates and everything, and so it's something that people have never seen before, and hopefully will become a staple of the neighborhoods where people, placemaking is really important, and that you can really change the whole scope of a neighborhood just by continuing to provide service and safe places for people.
That's fantastic. Thank you for. So you talked about how San Jose already really had a culture that made it possible for you to do all of this work. Yeah. What advice would you give people who are in smaller libraries or who are in organizations that don't have that culture? How can they start to move in this direction?
So I think the very first thing, and it's I think we do it here, and I'm starting to try to do even more of it, is actually going to talk to your community. So instead of just assuming you know what's best for your community, and sometimes we have a lot of preconceived notions, and that's maybe why they're, you know, the making aspect hasn't even been explored, because people think, well, it's too difficult. We don't have the money. We won't be able to do it. Go out and talk with your community. Find out what they're interested in. You might find that your community is really interested in something or not at all. And either one is okay. But being able to just have those dialogues and conversations internally and externally. So I think it's good sometimes if you go externally, then you can come back internally and you can say, well, we actually have some data now. We've talked to our community and here's what they're saying that they're wanting and needing. And you also might find that there are members of your community who are already identifying as makers and who may be interested in sharing their skills with somebody. You don't have to be an expert, is also another thing. I think a lot of people are very intimidated that, well, I'm not a coder, or I'm not familiar with how to solder or any of those sorts of things. One of the great things about making is learning together. And so, if you don't find anybody from the community, go on YouTube, find it together. If the 3D printer breaks in the middle of a workshop, say, this is a great opportunity for us to solve the problem together. Let's see if we can figure it out together. And invite your community to join you in that exploration, is I think really important. And then again, like I said, it does not have to always be super high tech. You can do a lot with a few LEDs and some batteries and some tape, or some copper tape and LEDs and cardboard. And you can teach a lot of great lessons through stuff like that. Again, like I said, you can visit our website, and we have a guidebook for mobile maker spaces, and then we also have a lot of programs on there, and all the programs that are on there also align with either Common Core or Next Generation Science Standards. So you can go to your teachers and find out from them what they're doing in their classrooms, and then tell them, here's how our programs enhance what's going on in the classrooms as well. But start small. Talk to your community, start small. That's really the best you can do, and I think you'll see it naturally starts to grow itself from there.
That's great. I want to ask you about another project you worked on with, I think, many partners, which is the Online Privacy Toolkit. So can you tell us a little bit about that project?
Yeah. So we created the Virtual Privacy Lab, and the VPL, as we call it, the Virtual Privacy Lab. It's actually a Knight Foundation funded prototype project. So at the first Library Night Challenge, we put in an application for that. And we were given a prototype grant for them. And a prototype grant gives you $35,000 in 6 months in order to create a project. So we knew that we wanted to create a privacy literacy tool of some kind. We originally partnered with the International Computer Science Institute. They have a team that's been working on some instruction modules called Teaching Privacy. And we also brought on SJSU game designers. And we decided we were going to create a side-scrolling video game. And so we did. We actually created a side-scrolling video game. It was pretty neat. It had a little guy running through a computer, and he would jump up and hit little CDs, and people would learn about privacy and then be asked questions about what their own personal needs were online. Then based on those answers to those questions, they'd be given a personalized toolkit with links and tips and resources on how to really manage and take control of their identities online. Included in that was also resources for people who had nonprofits or small businesses as well. And so once the prototype was over, we looked into what it would be like to create a full video game. I have a friend who's a video game designer, and so he owns his own company, and so he and I spoke at long length about what it would actually take, and we realized it was far out of our scope to make something really good. But we had all this content, and so we didn't want to lose that. So our wonderful web team, Julie O'Borney is one of our great web librarians, and she and their team built out using Drupal, which is what our website is built on, this virtual privacy lab, which you can go to our website again, sjpl.org/privacy. And you can find the tool there, and it's really kind of fun as you can go through all the modules and then build out your own toolkits. I'm going to actually be doing a WebJunction webinar on the virtual privacy lab and steps that you can do at your library to do privacy programming or look internally at your own privacy policies. And that is going to be on March 7th at 11:30. So if you go to the Web Junction site, you'll see the Privacy at Your Library link there.
Great. And who is using that toolkit now, and how are they using it?
So it's really built for everybody from teens to seniors. We've had thousands of people go on and build their own toolkits. The content's also provided in English, Spanish, and Vietnamese, which are the top 3 languages here in San Jose. And we found there's a real lack of education for privacy online in multiple languages. Other than English, it's really hard to find that. But people are, one of the things we're actually working on is doing some more user studying. Coming up right now, we're doing a content audit and then doing also some usability testing. So we're hoping to actually get some more concrete data answers on how people are effectively using it. But one of the more interesting stories of, we got invited to go to the National Network to End Domestic Violence's Tech Summit. And initially we didn't even think really about that connection and that demographic, but it was a really perfect fit. We got to present to social workers and people who run shelters and lawyers and law enforcement agents about how they can utilize this tool for their clients. Mm-hmm. And so if you think about it, so asking somebody to just stop being online nowadays is pretty much impossible. Mm-hmm. So how do you manage your online identity when you might have somebody who has all your personal information? Mm-hmm. But you don't want them to know where you're at or be able to access your bank accounts or any of that sort of stuff. So it can be a really useful tool for certain members of your community to be able to gain those skills. If you have members of your community who might be illegal immigrants, how can they still interact online without putting up red flags or still maintaining their privacy and being secure? And one of our, we really kind of just tried to make it for people of all sorts of different levels and skill sets and that sort of thing.
Sometimes, privacy's long been a professional value for us, but sometimes it feels like it's becoming less of a value culturally. And I think you've given some really interesting examples of kind of who this tool really benefits. I'm wondering if there are other conversations that it's really started around privacy with other people in your community?
I wouldn't necessarily say like in the community. I think internally it's created a lot of discussion. So one of the things we're about to do this summer is do a privacy audit for ourselves. And it's really great. ALA just came out with privacy guidelines. And if you haven't checked those out, I highly recommend doing so. The LIDA, in conjunction with they took those guidelines and then created checklists for libraries, and they're kind of tiered into 3 tiers. Tier 1 is what we really were hoping that every library would be able to meet the Tier 1. And then, eventually be able to meet 2 and 3, but we understand that some libraries have more control over their systems than others. But being able to, like you said, it is a professional value, and it's something that libraries are one of the kind of few places left where you can go and kind of feel truly private. We're not collecting demographic information that's attached to users' names or deleting patron records. We won't just give out information, even if a law enforcement official comes to us. There's a lot of things that libraries do that I don't think the public even really knows about, but maybe we should be telling them more about it and making sure that our policies align with those values and that our staff understands what the kind of ethics of privacy in libraries really are. And so we're working on developing some trainings for our staff, because if you didn't go to library, most of our staff has never gone to library school, right? In library school, we all learn about intellectual freedom and what a librarian's duty is to protect their people's privacy. But does a clerk or a page or an aide working at your library have that same training or skill set or knowledge? They might not. So kind of understanding that and being able to make sure that your library's policies are in place with that. As far as a bigger conversation with the public, I think it's important. People, you'll hear that privacy is dead comment a lot, and I don't think that it's dead. I think the definition is growing and changing. Try to get people to step into somebody else's shoes. think about for a second, if you were born today, your entire life would be online from before you were born, more likely than not. Your probably ultrasound pictures were online. Your parents haven't been asking your permission to post your photos online. Your, naked baby photos are like on everybody's Facebook feed. So how would you view privacy? It might be different than you or I. Or if you're from a different culture, a different country, you might think, walking to somebody's bedroom is totally fine. But like in America, that's probably and you have to knock first, right? And so people have different views of privacy, and so having the conversation with your patron that it's totally fine to have those different views, but you need to have the knowledge first in order to make decisions about how you interact online. So as long as you know how Google uses your information, then you can make a choice as to whether or not you want to use it. But if you don't have that information at all, you're not really making a choice. And I think privacy is actually becoming, as the digital divide gets smaller, as far as people being able to be connected more, that's great. But the actual privacy and how to be a good digital citizen is still very large. There's still a very large divide in that area. And so if you're brought up with computers and given tech training, which a lot of more affluent people are, then you'll know how to wipe your browser history and create good passwords and not send your email and not open those attachments because you've been interacting and had those chances the whole time. But if you're just given a smartphone or a computer for the first time and nobody has given you the resources to understand it, you probably don't have that same perspective or knowledge.
So we're running out of time, but I want to ask just one last question because, of course, this is a California Library Association video. It's just maybe share something with me that you value about California Library Association or what the association does for you as a member.
Yeah, I mean, I think it gives a really fantastic network of library workers in my general vicinity. And so therefore, a lot of us are facing the same challenges, working with similar communities, not just the Bay Area, but a lot of our neighborhoods, even in Southern California, kind of mimic a lot of the same demographic challenges that we face here in San Jose. The first library conference I ever went to was CLA, and I went during library school. And it's actually where I met the first people that I, started to connect with, and I'm still friends with them, years later, and they're still the people that I always go to first to seek ideas and to bounce. I have this crazy program idea. What do you guys think of it? Or, hey, do you want to partner with me to create this project? And there's groups of people that I've met at CLA that will call up and we'll all go out to dinner and brainstorm crazy things that may or may not ever come to fruition. But it's great to at least have that kind of resource and network of people that you can learn with and you can share, and in order to really serve my community and their communities more efficiently. And so together, we become stronger and we're able to kind of grow California libraries together and empower California libraries as a whole instead of feeling like we're independent.
That's fantastic. I feel the same way. We're going to sign off, though, and let folks get back to their jobs, get back to work. Hopefully, we will have an opportunity to meet in Riverside this year for the CLA conference. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today, and I welcome any feedback that you have about what I could do with this platform going forward to help share what's going on in libraries throughout California and bring inspiring guests that help you think about new services and programs for your community. So you can message me on Facebook, email me, or call me up. I'm pretty easy to find. Again, I'm Helen McAlery, your CLA president, and I look forward to talking with you next time. Thanks.
Bye.